Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here with our UK NAHA director, Elizabeth Ashley. Our webinar is entitled Ponder the Bee, Melissa Teachings About Community, Female Empowerment, and Honey. Elizabeth is the author of over 20 aromatherapy manuals, including Meeting the Melissa and the Ancient Greek Bee Priestess of Demeter. With over 35 years of professional experience, she teaches about both the spiritual aspects of essential oils and their effects on neurotransmission. While she is a clinical aromatherapist, these days she refers to herself as more of a wort cunner, the Old English term for someone who learns plant medicine from the plant itself. One of her master teachers has been the lemon balm plant, which would eventually initiate her into bee shamanism and to become a Melissa priestess. As well as her writing, she has a busy YouTube channel. Elizabeth writes under the pen name The Secret Healer, and as we mentioned, she's the UK director for NAHA and a regular contributing author to our aromatherapy journal. Welcome, Elizabeth. It's wonderful to have you here today.
Oh, it's so nice to be here. Thank you for having me, Annette. And thank you so much. All of my friends I can see out there. Lovely to see so many familiar names. Welcome into the beehive. Hello, everybody. Well, that's already gone wrong because a video got knocked off the beginning, but never mind. From the dawn of time, mankind has watched nature, marvelled at its intricacies and wonders, and from it language formed. To describe phenomenon like the trickling of water, rumbles of thunder, and the hum of the hive. The hum, a mellifluous, melodic soundscape of industry. A harmonious, coordinated thrum, the sound of order, the sound of success, of honey and sweetness on tap. Amalgamated efforts, every being working for the common good, whether some parts of the colony are infinitely more powerful than the one. So welcome to the beehive. My name is Elizabeth Ashley. I am the UK Director of NAHA, and I want to say a massive thank you to Annette and for the board for inviting me to talk to you about what I think must be one of the oldest recorded spiritual practices, and which is being inspired by nature, and particularly being inspired by the incomparable intelligence of bees. Now, I am a big believer in structure and also knowing when it's safe to go for a toilet break. So, a quick itinerary for you. First, I'm going to do what I call my orientation flight, where I'll talk a little bit about my background and my story and how I came here to be here today. And then, in a world full of bees, of which there are many, today we are talking about the honeybee, specifically because obviously they are fantastic at being able to alchemize beautiful honey, but also they're quite unusual in the bee kingdom in that they live in communities. They're social. And NAHA does bear some similarities to the colony in that females out-ratio males by hundreds to one. And in a patriarchal society such as we live in, there's obviously been times where people have implied that women are inferior to men or perhaps less organised. But I would like to posit that that is a human story, a male story. It's not true of us, and it's really not true of the bees. And try again. And therefore, we should be empowered in knowing that the creature that was voted to be the most important on our planet this year lives in societies that are predominantly female, and maybe there are things that they can teach us about being outstanding in this world. Now, beekeeping is full of incredibly observant and patient people. I'd say that was kind of a trait of the bee cult, but none more so than a man called Thomas Seeley, who for decades has intently watched what I call the betwixt and the between, the moment from when the swarm leaves the hives and settles on a swarm host, and then they decide what to do next. And it's through his research that we know huge amounts about the collective decisions that bees make. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about how each beehive is a colony, and the colony is an animal, and each beehive has its own personality, ambitions, and temper, and most of it is controlled by the queen. So the webinar will be a mix of recordings and live material. It's designed to be around about 45 minutes, so hopefully if all goes to plan, I will have time for questions at the end. But the presentation is a little bit like a bee colony, that there are a lot of unpredictable moving parts. So hopefully I haven't been too clever for my own good, and hopefully I don't get stung. Now, so do you have a cup of tea? I am British, you know. Cup of tea is the star of our universe, and these things have to happen. So if you do have a cup of tea, I would bid you warm your hands around it. Breathe in the beautiful scented steam and come and sit a while with me. Keep me company while I do one of my most favourite things, to ponder the bee. Because here is a non-human society, successful for over 40 million years. And perhaps then it might have something to teach us about leadership, about disagreement, and about navigating change. So first, let me introduce myself, efficiently and concisely, if you will, and then I shall tell you a story, most strange, most unsettling, and bizarre. It's kind of one of those once I did this, everything changed stories that I hate from ChatGPT, but it's not an AI marketing pitch. It was my life and the strange world I entered through Melissa. So if you do happen to have a bottle nearby, maybe some lemon balm tea, or even perhaps the plant, I'd love you for a moment to just close your eyes and take a sniff. A long, slow inhale, and with the intention that you might hear the spirit of the plant through my words. You'll hear the voice of Melissa come up often. Often I shall say her name, Melissa, and it is her desire, her ambition, nay, her mission, that she will punctuate my story with her scent. So every time you hear her name, Melissa, maybe lift her to your nose and breathe her in. Melissa, an unwritten adjective from plant language, from bee language, yet somehow her meaning defies human words. Yet Melissa adds depth and description to my story. You might receive it as a proxy invitation from the bees, a coded message inviting you into their quorum and welcoming you home. Now, if you don't have any Melissa by you and you would like to grab some, by all means, skip my boring biography. You have time for a swift 2-minute dash, so make a beeline for it. But first, my biography. So, I live in Ludlow, a medieval town on the borders of England and Wales, with my youngest of my 3 children, Dexter, and the husband whom we shall refer to as the strong silent one. He's a man of few words, but he's very good at screwing and hammering together bits of wood to make hexagons and hives. He is an excellent gardener, and the bees and I live in blissful existence surrounded by hexagons, roses and herbs. And I am I'm going to say it's not turning over. 1 second. There we go. I am a clinical aromatherapist with over 30 years professional experience, but mostly I would call myself an essential oil researcher. I write books under the name The Secret Healer, and I am interested in bringing together the latest clinical evidence from the labs with the earliest mentions of the plant in history. I'm both fascinated by neuroscience and the mind-body connection, but also the spiritual intentions of a plant to support our holistic ideas of wellness. I am both a ferocious researcher, obsessed with empirical study, and a walk-runner who learns from the spirit of the plant. And at the core of everything I do, I want to know what a plant knows, what the primary objective of its soul path seems to be, and hopefully to understand how it wishes to engage with humanity. And on the screen you'll see 3 of my books. In fact, I've written 24, the first and the most recent. Now, if I were to write the first one, The Complete Guide to Clinical Aromatherapy and the Essential Oils of the Physical Body, I would definitely name something shorter, snappier, I think. But this one, if you haven't already got it, is available for free download on all ebook platforms. And it was the root of why I was so kindly asked to become the UK director of NAHA, and I was invited to the US to meet you in Salt Lake City in 2006. The other 2 are essentially one tale. The story of the Melissa plant, the Melissa priestesses who bore the same name, priestesses who were responsible for some of the most important spiritual initiations of the ancient world, the beginnings of democracy, no less, and the foundations of what would become one of the greatest civilizations of all time. And what I found was this: ancient Greece was built upon the philosophies of the polis, the city-state, and each polis was a colony which was inspired by qualities they observed of bees. So, as I wrote this Melissa book, insistently probing into all the nooks and crannies of lemon balm medicine, dusty old books began to speak to petri dishes, and 3 arcane worlds opened up to me: the plant realm, the bee kingdom, and perhaps most strangely, long forgotten secrets of ancient Greece. I was haunted by Melissa and the notion that I had maybe once belonged to something bigger that had been lost, and I mourned the passing of these women's rituals with every fibre of my being. It was a really painful time for me. I was caught in the betwixt and between, knowing that I maybe remembered something, but being completely unable to articulate what it might have to do with lemon balm. Was it everything? Was it nothing? And every time I came back to the question, I choked, always interrogating the fragrance, knowing it was speaking to me, but unable to justify how. After months of analysing historical records, I decided to take a different tack. I wanted to get my hands into a beehive. And in that very first beekeeping lesson, it finally started to make sense. Apiarists use Melissa officinalis to attract and house swarms and bring in new communities of bees. And then they use it to keep them living there happily together. And this works because lemon balm has an uncannily similar chemical profile to one of their most important communication pheromones. I had been, for all intents and purposes, mainlining Nasonoff, the fragrant communication system that the bees use to call each other home and to keep their communities together. That was way back in 2018, and years on, I consider Melissa officinalis to be my primary plant teacher, my soul friend, and my anima cara, my access into the world of plant spirits, into the hive mind, and into the honeybee community. Honeybees, one of the few bee species still thriving on our planet. In total, we share the earth with around about 20,000 different bee species. Some are social, some are solitary. There's only about 500 species that make and store honey. And actually, there's only 8 species of true honeybees that exist. Most of those are stingless. The most common is Apis mellifera, who live in permanent communities with thousands of members. And honeybees operate a distinct caste system. At the height of summer, they'll have 60,000 female workers who are sterile, about 500 drone bees, and the egg layer at the centre of the colony, the mother, the queen. A dynamic superorganism which is continuously growing and splitting and swarming, reducing in numbers and starting the cycle again, where bumblebee colonies live for about a year. Honeybee colonies can live for years and years. And so for this reason, man's always looked at the honeybee to see how it makes its communities work. Now, of course, they're called busy bees for a reason, and industry is at the heart of the hive. One of the most profound mysteries is how is industry allocated? How does a bee know what job it's supposed to do? Because every day of a bee's life has a duty apportioned to it, although how they know what to do is unclear. Jacqueline Freeman, in her beautiful book, Songs of Increase, tells of how the bees spoke to her and told her the secrets of how this works. That the male bees, the drones, who are in the minority, are allowed to enter any hive, whereas the guard bees keep females from other colonies out unless they're carrying pollen. They have to show that they are going to contribute to the upkeep of the colony. So it's buckets of pollen behind the knees that is currency for them. Drone bees, though, she says, are admitted because of their songs. Deep, resonant lullabies that they sing into the nursery frames where the larvae are growing. And in their deep basso profundo hum, they tell the stories of the bees, of the ancestry of their lineage, and the heroic places that some of the local colonies have been to. Drone bees not only control the DNA of all the colonies, but they're the storytellers, she says, the musicians and the bards. And then the maidens, the sisters or worker bees, take their turn, singing in their sweet contralto hum of all the amazing things that each bee is going to be capable of doing, the jobs they'll do, and of course, the beauty of the garden. Now, I love this because it answers a question that I have had for ages, and it's this. How do new bees know their first job is to take out the dead when they hatch? I don't know. Nobody knows, but they do. Day by day, as they age, they take on new roles. Nurse bees, who feed the young. Fanning bees, who cool the space to evaporate the honey. Water bees, who bring in moisture to maintain humidity. Guard bees, and of course, we shouldn't forget the foragers, whom you'll see out in the garden. And by the time you do, they're already more than halfway through their lives. And I like the idea that they seem to get promoted. They're given the chance to learn and experience all of the jobs until eventually they will meet the sun and grace the garden of whom they become the genitals, making love lustily to the flowers, but sharing bounty with all of their sister foragers. So that just leaves the queen, a most extraordinary creature who was elected by the Melissa-like scent and will be raised as an immaculate being, and then she will live in service to the hive. Within that, she has very little agency, and almost every action she takes will be determined by the collective. The only thing she'll really decide upon herself is when she'll take her maiden flight. Her very existence was determined by the sisters. They created the comb into which she was laid. Her egg was laid by a queen who measured it with her caliper feet, and when she realised it was just big enough for a worker, she laid in a fertilised egg. Sisters patrolled the comb, and for whatever reason, they decided that this would be the one whom they would raise to be special. And to signal the decision, they mark her cell with rich Nasonoff, just like your Melissa oil, feeding her only on royal jelly. She is spoiled into being a priestess, and she'll have an entirely different physiology to the rest. She'll live 2 to 5 years, where the other females survive just about 6 weeks. And as long as a healthy queen lives in the hive, the ovaries of the sisters are switched off. But they are capable of laying drones if any problems start, because drones are born from unfertilised eggs. And as the new princess grows strong in her cell, capped by the workers for safety, the rest of the colony prepares to swarm, leaving the princess space to fulfill her role in peace. Her destiny will be to mate many times over the period of a couple of days and then disappear into the darkness of the hive to service the community's needs laying around about 2,000 eggs a day. The decision to swarm is made by the worker bee collective in its entirety. A shared biological response activated by overcrowding, congestion in the hive, and a worry that there might not be enough resource to see them through the future. So the queen runs out of laying space, she slows down production. Overcrowding means nurse bees have got excess brood food and nowhere to use it. So when the worker bees build special queen cells, they also need to feed the old queen to go on a diet, so she has enough fitness to be able to fly to the swarm pole and onto their new home. And the old queen and roughly half the community of sisters live in absolute faith that they can find a new home. And meanwhile, the chosen daughter of the queen will then hatch, fight any other princesses if necessary to the death, and then she will take her maiden flight. When bees swarm, they are led by the queen into a liminal space that priestesses call the neither neither. They are neither the old colony, they have left that, and neither are they a new one yet. This is reproduction. A new colony is about to be born, pregnant with possibilities. This is a time of debate as they collectively decide what the new colony is going to look like. When they left the home, they had no vision except for the swarm pole. And now we may think of the swarm pole as akin to being a little like the agora in ancient Greece. The birthplace of democracy. The agora was a marketplace at the foot of the Acropolis where men performed being Greek, exchanging ideas, philosophizing, and asserting their politics to those who saw fit to listen. Their job was to convince, to persuade and cajole before certain things were put to the vote. The amount of time allocated to each person was determined by a water clock, a clepsydra that ensured everyone had their chance to speak. So the swarm pole resembles the agora in many ways. First, you should know that bees always like to go where bees have been before. So over time it becomes predictable not only that they will swarm, but also that they'll go somewhere that you expect them to go. And when they do, that's when the magic starts, because the swarm pole is a liminal space, the neither neither, the betwixt and the between, a little like this election period as Naha prepares to become something new. So I've tried to show the swarm on the pole as best as I can. This is where about 80% of swarms tend to land when they arrive in my garden, or if I don't convince them to go where I want them to go, when they prepare to leave me. So you can see the rose arches, and I've marked the place where most swarms have landed in the past, so you can see them. Their home is just behind here, look, about 20 feet behind that. So, honeybees choose a new home through a decentralized and democratic process, led by scout bees. Scout bees are around about 300 to 500 of the oldest, most experienced worker bees. So obviously they've got a really good understanding of the lay of the land. They've also been guard bees, so they know what it takes to protect a hive. And they've been nurse bees in the past, so they understand what it takes to feed the colony. So they have a really good understanding of what conditions their new space might need to home their successful community. So they fly out in all directions to find potential cavities, such as hollow trees, chimneys, washing machines, or beautiful new designs of hives made by my husband. And each scout snoops to recce the site to establish how the niche would perform as a likely home. So 40 litres volume is your ideal, nice small entrance so it's easy to defend and a good height off the ground. And if they like it, they mark it with Nazanoff. There's that Melissa scent again. This time it's so that the rest of their compadres can find it. And when they zoop back to the cluster to make their pitch, they do so by ways of the waggle dance, a dance in the figure of 8. Now, ordinarily, the waggle dance shows pollen. The figure of 8 dance says it's this angle to the sun, this far away, and we need this number of sisters to harvest the forage. In the case of the swarm, though, mainly because they've gorged themselves on honey, their attention is laser focused on finding their new home. They dance their opinions over the surface of the swarm, and they dance their invitation very warmly. Come out, come, check this site out, each dance says. Observe the line of my body in angle to the sun. I should be going bzzz, shouldn't I? Assess how long I dance, then fly. I bid you to see for yourself. I'd love your opinion on it. If you love it, please consider helping me canvass for it. Just follow the coordinates I've given you and then sniff. I've marked the places I like with Nazanoff, but then I also found a great place that the strong silent one made for us, and I didn't need to mark that because the secret healer has already marked it with Melissa. And so off the next scout bee goes to look at a new site, and then another, and then another, and then they come back and they dance their surroundings back on the dance floor of the swarm. And of course you can watch what's happening in real time because it's outside in the open, and they'll let you get really close because they are so full of honey and docile. You just have to make sure you don't get them in your hair. So dancing begins quite merrily because they are really chill after what is their equivalent of Christmas dinner. They're stuffed full of sugar. But as each scout returns, the waggle dance becomes more excited. Enthusiasm for a site is expressed by rigorous dancing, exuberant expression of, this is what I think. So, to me, what it feels like is, this is the dance floor of a ballroom championship and everybody's showing off, and then the judge comes and he touches them on the shoulder and he says, I'm sorry, your dance wasn't good enough. And so they gently remove themselves from the contest. Well, the bees do the same. Eventually, those who have been advocating for sites that are inferior kind of start to drop out. And if they do continue, my favourite thing, Another bee comes up and gives them a gentle headbutt, and it goes, that's enough. And it is. It's enough to stop them dancing. But how long would this take to persuade 3,000, nay 30,000 members to a new hive? Well, sometimes it does take ages. This tiny swarm took 9 days to make a decision. They'd landed there under a much larger swarm, and they were in the much higher arms of the rose, and I thought they'd lost their queen. I thought there were probably too small a cast to defend a hive, so I thought either they're going to die or they're going to go and find themselves the other swarm again. Well, no, it took them 9 days, but they did go into the swarm box I had left them. So 9 days. So instead of waiting for a unanimous vote, usually a swarm will wait for what is known as a quorum of about 20 or 30 scout bees, all simultaneously visiting, agreeing, and dancing about the same destination. Now, my mother is absolutely oblivious to bees who are swarming. She doesn't care they're going in the hair. She walks through them way too slowly. So I always want this to resolve very quickly. What I want to see is waggle dances becoming circle dances, because circle dances say, no, no, we found somewhere really close.
They've decided that they're going to move in a minute, so they'll shift in a minute. You can see, look, they're really going mad and doing their waggle dance, look. Getting really excited to move. They've decided where they're going to go. After me tanging for about an hour, etc. Can't see the queen. It'd be great if you saw it, but I can't see it. You can see them doing their little waggle dances. Oh, look, look, look. Oh. Yeah, look, they're dancing, dancing, dancing.
Circle dances say the good stuff is less than 100 meters from the swarm post. So, decisions are community led. Sisters are invited to express their opinions, to persuade as enthusiastically as they like, but when it's time to shut up, shut up. And then the quorum is established. The hum of the swarm changes. The sisters begin to warm up their wings, and for about an hour you can hear it get louder and louder and louder until the commotion sounds like a chainsaw in the hedge, and they lift and joyfully fly in their thousands like a cloud to the new hive to begin to build.
Here they go! Yay, go! Oh my goodness, and they're going into the new hive! Yay, go! What do I want to get in the hair? Oh, look at you! Hello, all of you! Oh my goodness! Bees everywhere, everywhere! Look! Going from the purple one into the yellow one. I only told them this morning. Oh my goodness! Fantastic!
In the swarm, the queen keeps the cluster together. Pheromones from her mouth are passed continually between the bees to reassure them that mother is healthy and there. Each queen has her own distinctive scent, and it's her pheromones that keep the swarm clustered together. But as far as decisions go, she doesn't make decisions, and she won't influence them either. But as they enter the new hive, she regains her massive consequentiality because her character will influence all of the generations born from her. I think the most interesting thing about these colonies is they can be entirely different from their parents, partly because of the culture and temperament of the colony is largely dictated by the queen, but more how the queen engages with her environment. So you'd imagine that Hive B, that came from Hive A, with their queen, might ostensibly be the same as Hive A was. But that's not quite what happens, and watching them is delightful. Sometimes they go from being really peaceful, tranquil bees to becoming really bossy. This hive loves sunbathing. None of the other hives do it. At the slightest sight of sunshine, they're going to be sunbathing outside. They even sleep outside sometimes. Had one colony that just loved building comb, fiercely ambitious. They built cathedrals of wax in the new hive because it was bigger than the one they had before. I like to think of the conversations that maybe were going on the swarm pole. Have you seen the size of it? We could do amazing things in there. Another colony I had went from being so robust with immaculate frames of brood comb and honey to hardly making any at all. But one year, the most tranquil of my bees decided to move into the hive next door to their old one, and for some reason began to attack. The bees, for the most part, ignore the silent one. They tend to buzz me when my hair's down, ergo we assumed there must be less trouble by his shiny bald head. But one day, only about a week after they'd moved, they randomly decided to stalk him. I've no explanation for why, but they stung him once, they stung him twice, they stung him 6 times round the ear. The side, incidentally, that we now know was forming cancer. He came into the house to tell me. I told him not to go down again because the sting pheromone was on his skin, but being tidy and a bloke, he disobeyed. He went to gather up his tools and they chased him down the garden en masse to sting him again. I tell you this because bees are a community and it is the colony that is the animal. A hive can be unified, but horrid. Communities can be extraordinarily well coordinated towards cultures of attack. And so by nature, collective action isn't inherently virtuous, nor is cohesion necessarily health. A community can work together impressively towards destructive ends. A successful community needs more than unity. What it needs is a healthy culture, although what a healthy culture might look like, of course, is still up for debate. Oddly, the day after the "We'll Make the Silent One Sing" episode, the bees were quiet again. Had that behaviour happened for more than 2 days, I would have sought out the queen, killed her and placed the bees in with a calmer colony. But as it happened, there was no need. But if I had done that, the aggression would not be gone, for the queen's biology would have been bred through into the sisters, and so at least 6 weeks needs to pass until the nastiness has gone. It leaves a legacy that outlives the queen. But what sort of things make a hive turn hot, as it's called? How does something inherently benign turn into something aggressive? Well, before we ask whether the culture itself is bad, we should ask what conditions the colony is living under. Scarcity can make a peaceful colony defensive. Threat can make it defensive. Heat, hunger, disruption, many things. But sometimes the problem really is the queen. Perhaps she is aged or infirm. Perhaps she's too old, so her laying has become too slow. Or it could be that her genetics simply produce bees that are more inclined to being defensive. Then generation of worker bees will all carry those genetics. So the queen doesn't rule the culture, not in the way that she commands it, but she influences conditions. And from that, the culture will continually renew itself profoundly under the influence of the queen. So within this, we should reflect upon the misconception that perhaps if everybody works for the common good, then therefore conformity must be good. But I would say, no, your aggressive colony demonstrates why that is insufficient. It is the nature of the common good that matters. And so we come, oh, no, go back. I cannot go back. And so we come full circle, because just as I have alluded to at the start, I believe that some bees do see us as part of their community. That it was always Melissa calling us home. And after all, if you follow me on YouTube, you will know that the Melissa priestesses were trained by the Melissae nymphs, who were trusted to raise the gods, nursemaids of Zeus, of Apollo and Dionysus. They seem to have been chosen because of their excellent personalities and, I think, common sense. And so, if that is indeed true, perhaps they too are watching us, observing our every move and studying our Naha community as we operate within our collective gardens. And since we have spent 45 minutes pondering the bee, then perhaps the bee gets to ponder us. Now, let me see if I can get this to go backwards. No, stay here. No, doesn't want to play. And so, if the bee does get to ponder Naha, I wonder what it will see. Can we discern leadership from sovereignty? Are we brave enough for challenges that arise from that? Are we capable of disagreement without fear of being stung? Do we value group success higher than the victories of the one? But perhaps the question the bees might be most interested in knowing is this. Once we have decided what our community stands for, how do we build it? For security, for growth, and protection for those new bees to come. Fellow members of Naha, I'd ask you to join me in thanking my greatest of plant allies. Please join me in toasting Melissa.
Thank you, Elizabeth. That was wonderful. I am jealous of your kids who got to hear stories, bedtime stories from you at night. That was just fantastic. So we are going to open it now for questions and answers. And I did see a couple come in. So let's go to the first one. The first question says, thank you so much for speaking of the precious Melissa honeybees. I have a two-part question. In your reading and research, have you ever come across spiritual symbolism of getting stung by a worker bee? Do you know any ancient beliefs regarding the venom, the unfortunate death of an innocent bee, and the physical effects upon the individual?
That is a small story with a very long answer. So actually I can give you an account of what happened to me, in that when I first started studying bee shamanism, I couldn't really see what was going on. And then I'd had the bees for about 6 weeks, I guess, and one came and stung me right on the top of my head, which in Melissa work we call the dream wheel. So it's akin to the crown chakra, but the dream wheel. And then suddenly I was having all of these very, very strong dreams about bees, about the Melissa, and it was the sting that seemed to open up the channels. So sting can definitely be like a spiritual initiation, but also, of course, sting is, if you think about any kind of shamanic initiation, what usually happens is you go through this incredibly torturous time in your life. Spiritual initiations don't really happen as nice things. And so sting medicine is as much symbolic of these awful things that will happen that are hurtful, but then you come out the other side stronger. And as I say, and specifically that happens a legitimate thing. In terms of legends, I'm not even sure that it would be a legend, but I'm not sure who asked the question, so sorry, I'm not sure who I'm referring to. But bee sting therapy went on to be acupuncture. So when a bee stings you, we all know about hyaluronic acid now, because it's in every skincare, isn't it? Venom actually breaks down the hyaluronic acid, and which is why you have this sort of really huge amount of swelling. And so it actually disturbs all of the energetic systems within your body. And I actually think that this is part of what happens to the energetic bodies around you in terms of your aura and chakras. But it will have this sort of shift. And I don't think it was in any of these groups. Somebody actually sent me a fantastic link the other day to a lady who had Lyme disease and deliberately put herself into an awful situation where she got stung by many, many African bees, and African bees are nasty. And she ended up in a terrible situation in hospital, but the Lyme disease went. It completely cleared out her system. So it's really interesting, because there's lots of old stories about sting medicine, about how it will transform your spiritual side, but you'll also see that in terms of actual physical medicine. Thank you for the question.
Okay, thank you. The question was from Carrie and Genos, by the way.
Carrie.
Yes, and there was another part to the question. This occurrence would be completely natural and not include apitherapy or an intentional sting.
Well, I mean, quite often the bees do it whether you like it or not. You might have noticed actually, Carrie, that I did kind of allude to something that happened to Daryl when he was stalked by those bees. They stung him right over where the cancer was forming. And so sometimes the whole idea of sting is to bring awareness. Bees don't really sting because they want to very often. It's usually defensive. And actually, I've never seen this because I'm too much of a wuss. I don't like being stung at all. But if you're quite patient, if it stings you by accident, which quite often they do, if you give it enough space, it will actually unwind its sting. So it will let itself out. So a lot of the time it's about bringing awareness. And I saw Paula saying about, I wonder if they were trying to heal a cancer, maybe. But I think more often it's about, you should be noticing what's going on here. Before now I've had stings on the third eye as well. But quite often people get stung where they've got problems with arthritis and stuff. And it's horrible because it really itches. But afterwards you feel like, that's really weird. That doesn't hurt as much as it did before. And often it is about bringing awareness to something. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't. Yes, yes. Well, you just said it all.
Oh, thank you, Carrie.
Well, Elizabeth, that was such a fabulous webinar. I love the imagery, the presentation. You're amazing. And we just want to thank you so much for taking the time with us today and to give us your wonderful storytelling and information about bees. Incredibly interesting and wonderful. Thank you so much. Did you have any final comments, Elizabeth?
Well, I would like to thank everybody for being here. I would also really like to say I treasure the fact that people still want to hear about the spiritual aspects of the essential oils. I know there's quite a lot of campaigning to up the clinical level, and of course we all want that. But I worry sometimes that it is at the expense of the spiritual side, especially when AI is really against it too. Excuse me, Alexa off. Especially when AI is really flattening the spiritual side. So any opportunities that people would like to give me to speak about the spiritual aspects, I would gratefully receive. And likewise, if people want to talk to me about it, I would really welcome it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And also I want to say thank you to you, Annette, for everything that you have been doing over the past 11 years.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure. I've loved it every minute.
Thank you.